recently the President of South Africa, President Jacob Zuma, announced that there will be free fee higher education in South Africa. But joining us to elaborate more on the feasibility and how government plans to enroll free higher education is the Minister of Higher Education herself, Ms. Mkhize. Minister, thank you so much for joining us. Now, we understand that there has been this announcement by the President that there should be free higher education, but now there has been a lot of concerns from different parties. Now, can you just share with us, how will the first-year students benefit from this initiative?
Thank you very much for having me. The announcement was made by the President, President Zuma, as you are saying, after a due process in government and consultation with some stakeholders following the release of the Judge Hair Commission report. Basically, we looked at the number of people who had applied. Remember, the closing dates for people who will be registering this year were sometime early in the year, the latest by July. So, who had applied, who were from families who were earning below 350,000, but also people who had applied to NSFAS, saying we have applied in universities but we will need financial assistance. So those are the people whom we are looking at, that as their results come out and they qualify, they will have to be considered within the new dispensation. And that's basically the category of people, the phasing in. We are beginning to phase in the implementation of free education, starting with that category of people.
Now, Minister, I said earlier on that there have been a lot of concerns, but also there has been a hype around people going to universities so that they can access this free higher education. For example, the EFF has called for all those that have passed matric and those that had not gotten a chance to go to matric, to go to university due to financial constraints. They have called for everyone to flock to universities so that they can access free higher education. What is your comment on the latest Julius Malema's comments on people going to universities? Is it a political stance or a recipe for chaos? What would you say on his latest comment on the matter?
I think it's, you know, I spoke to Dr. Ndlozi, who has just finished his PhD, was graduating. I said, how did you access the university? Because basically there are procedures you can't just change in any institution of higher learning or a college. You have to apply, you have to qualify in terms of the marks that they require, and you have to get an acceptance letter even before you approach NSFAS, even before you go to a bank to look at your bank statement and say, I'm able to pay if you have money. So there's a problem with that kind of statements. It's illogical, because institutions of higher learning do not work like that. TVET colleges do not work like that. You always have to get prior approval before you get in. But also, you know, I think South Africans were taken aback. They were shocked, because this decision has been on the table for quite some time, that we must phase in a free education for the poor and the working class. But government has always hesitated. The NSFAS was established, but whatever was contributed towards the financial assistance of students was never enough. Hence, some were dropping out. But I think the setting up, the establishment of that commission, the Judge Hair Commission report, it allowed many experts to interact with the commission and to give views and recommendations. And partly the ones that were taken by government to say, let's do what is within a NSFAS framework and just enhance it in such a way that a person is able to complete the studies instead of coming out before you complete. It gave government courage to move forward and really implement the decision which has been on the table for decades now.
Indeed, the ANC government has had the challenge where there are a lot of concerns around having to put policies in on paper but not implementing them. Hopefully with this one, it is clear to everyone that the ANC government is not only about proposing policies but also implementing them to better the lives of South Africans. But also going back to the free higher education, I understand that with Julius Malema's statement, obviously there's going to be that kind of a hype at universities that should we not get what we want, we could resort to protesting. What are some of the things that government has put in place, or measures that government has put in place to ensure that this rollout of free education to those that are deserving is done in a smooth and more protected way, that they could prevent all the protests that we saw in the past where students were still demanding free higher education?
I would persuade our young people who aspires to get space in universities to apply in an orderly manner, which is approved in terms of governance in these institutions. I will be surprised if they used the announcement in a negative way. In other words, end up getting the results which were not intended, not desired by the president. So I believe young people will make their own discretion and understanding of how to approach universities. And so, but also in terms of universities, we will be appealing to them once they are all back at work. We will have a formal briefing together with them, whereby we explain the procedures, the standard procedures, which are universal, which you find all over the world, really. And there are other things that we are doing in the interim, is to explain as we are explaining today. But government as a whole, through government communications, has taken a stand that the president made an announcement. Tomorrow there will be a detailed briefing at government communications, whereby we will be elaborating and explaining. Treasury will be represented, higher education will be represented, monitoring and evaluation and presidency, they will be represented. So it's just to clarify the decision that it was not opportunistic, it was not talking to the emotions of the conference. It's something that government has been looking at for some time, and they got the Judge Hair Commission report. We couldn't implement everything that is in that report, but we look at what is within our reach, already within our budget vote in terms of NSFAS budgeted for, that we can only increase within those, but we couldn't just disrupt the whole treasury budget as presented by the Minister of Finance, but we could increase within those budget vote boundaries.
But now, Minister, you have some institutions also raising concerns, particularly the University of South Africa, saying that they needed at least a year for government to engage with them on the matter, so that they have enough time to phase out the ones that were already paying, so that they can now roll in the free higher education. What do you think of those concerns that have been raised by those institutions? How justifiable are those concerns?
Well, I suppose I have to be more mature and serious and support them. At face value, it looks like the poor's needs can wait for a year while I'm sorting up my systems. That's basically how I had Professor Bauer representing USAF. The executive committee representing universities. But to me it was like, having gone through the pain and agony of watching young people facing the police, tear gas, and then almost in a 1976 conflict with the police, I said, okay, surely it's true we needed more time, but it's about people's lives, which you are saying that we should have just put on hold and said, well, we need a year to really sort out our systems. We will support them. We will work with them. As soon as they come back, we will invite all vice chancellors, as we did before the announcement was made. We indicated to them what was coming their way. We also invited the registrars to look at the status of readiness. We'll continue engaging with them, supporting them, because they are the cold phase of this implementation. We'll support them so that they are not seen or perceived by students as people who are saying, we don't support the decision, because that will invite hostility. Hence, I think one has to really be close to them and make sure that we allow the management of this to be as smooth as possible.
Now, Minister, I understand that you're still going to have a formal briefing where all the relevant stakeholders will be represented, or the affected departments will be represented. But now, can you just briefly share with us, the Commission found that the free higher education is not feasible. Now, where will the money come from now? Has government found some investors, or there are some coffers that government is going to go to and get the money from? Where exactly is the money going to come from?
Yeah, maybe, you know, if you look at the report, it looked at everybody who is studying, whether in public or private universities. And so there were proposals that, look, government must be out of this. Let's mobilize the commercial banks so that whoever wants to study has to deal directly with the banks. Government just offers a guarantor. So from that point of view of supporting everybody, public and in private institutions, it really will be an impossible task. But in this instance, because at the moment we are limiting ourselves to those, the poorest of the poor, that's why I said we looked at the numbers of those who qualify also in universities. Remember, we're talking about universities and TVET colleges, which already many people have been applying and getting in those colleges free of charge. Not to say we're starting from a zero budget. The decision was made based on what we already have in the kitty within NSFAS for universities, deserving students, and for students who are going to TVET colleges. The exercise that government has to go through, treasury, monitoring, evaluation, and ourselves at a technical level was, if we increase this support to cover transport and accommodation, where then do we find extra money from? And that's where, after taking some time, Treasury set a limit and said, you are not going to go beyond this. At a certain point, they cleared it and said, we are comfortable with this. So my assumption was that as the technical team was working, they realized that there's no new budget vote we are introducing to our budget. It's a question of saying, it's almost like when you anticipate that I might need to increase this for this reason. I might need to increase this activity within my budget framework. So we were assured that whatever we were proposing will be within the means of our fiscus as it stands at the moment.
So, Minister, universities South Africa, USF particularly, if they have such concerns of the universities and an umbrella body, the universities not having enough time to phase out and roll in a particular system, is government concerned, or aren't you concerned as government that it might happen that there might be hindrances, or particularly from the side of the universities, to effect this free higher education? Or you already have a means that you are going to implement to make sure that even though there are these concerns from universities, you can still implement the free higher education without having to make sure that universities also come to party in a way that is open for everyone and everyone is comfortable with it?
I don't even think there's a new proposal on the table that people could say we needed completely different systems to process people. If, for instance, you are talking about first is academic entrance criteria in different faculties, I don't think universities have to develop new ones. If it's about the closing date during which people applied, we respect that. We respect that, like in any institution, our young aspirant people will respect also that if it's said in this faculty, we closed in July, there's no way in which we can expect them to do anything new. When it comes to NSFAS, also we expect that today, you know how you manage finances, you use systems, you work through platforms online. Nobody, even if you were to manage $1 trillion today, you would say it's only a question of getting your systems talking to the individuals that are beneficiaries. So I fully agree for any change. You know, I'm sitting in a position of privilege as I'm talking to you. If you were to say, do you want to change anything, I would be uncomfortable because it's gonna destabilize the status quo, what I'm used to, what is working, what has worked over years. But where I'm sitting, I really do believe that we have to all fight for radical transformation in our post-school education and training system. It's unsustainable to stick to exclusive measures with no possibilities of turning around the situation for many young people who are out there in the street. I'm an advocate of both of entrance to both universities and TVET colleges, and that's the balance we'll be promoting and marketing so that we don't overload any system. If we were to give universities a year, from a capacity point of view, I don't know whether they are able to improve the infrastructure over a few months and bring about changes. But I do believe that we have to be creative and look at all the systems that the recommendations of the judge they spoke to, some online courses, TVET colleges, some that offered in a traditional manner. For me, I see this as a beginning of a real conversation of how do we have institutions of higher learning being accessible to all. Because basically what we are saying is that we are not ready. They are not going to be accessible. You can wait. And I think I'll be cautious and not to promote that kind of a public discourse.
Now, lastly, Minister, understanding that you're not putting into table a new budget vote, it's something that you had already put forth to Treasury. How much, if you can estimate for us, is this free education going to cost the Exchequer?
Yeah, you are putting me in trouble. The Minister of Finance is going to fight with me because he made it clear that nobody must talk about money, including the President is not going to talk about money. Basically, the exercise that I said the technical teams went through really looked at the amount of money that we might require to improve the support of all the students who qualifies for this. Last year, 2015, 2016, we needed about 5 billion. And we found it within our own system to start with of higher education and learning. And we are looking at doubling that. We're looking at our own systems where we have different resources starting with, and you know the rest might come from other sectors that are beyond our control. But the technical team took time to look at the numbers, and they were thorough, and they had to convince the ministerial committee that they looked at numbers and the figures next to those numbers.
Thank you so much, Minister. And all the best with the universities as well as the briefing that you're having. Well, that's it from the Minister of Higher Education, just giving us a brief as to how government plans to enforce and effect the free fee higher education, it's back to you.